Good night, world. This is Ivan O'Mara. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna continue where I left off with when I talked about the world of Zayn I created. I'm gonna reiterate a few things because I watched my video, I watched my design map video, and I noticed how you got the glare of the light. You couldn't see some of the words well, so I thought it would be cool to to continue the video about design. I left out a few things that I didn't mention in my last video, so I thought it would be cool to continue off the video when I talked about the world of Zayn I created. I moved my board so it's away from the light, so you should be able to see the words on the board well now because I moved the board over to the left side. So now you should be able to see it well because I know it was annoying, even though it was an interesting video. I'm pretty sure you guys were annoyed when you couldn't see the words well. So now I'm gonna continue where I left off with what from my last overzealous design map video when I talk about my world in depth. Interesting video. You better fucking enjoy the series as much as you can because once I'm getting a piece of fuck out my way after this. Right. So briefly, very briefly, I'm gonna reiterate a few things. I'm not gonna mention everything that I mentioned in my last video because you guys already have an idea of what my world's about. I'm gonna talk about a few things that I mentioned in my last video. So first off, I'm gonna talk about my 3 volumes. I'm gonna talk about my 3 volumes again. I hope you guys can see this one now. So Zanus, Last Hope for Zanus, right? Right, is what? A 192,000 word novel. Okay. Whereas Fellowship of the what? Fellowship of the Ring is 177,000 words. So Last Hope for Zanus is slightly longer than what? Fellowship of the Ring. It's about 30 to 60 page longer, depending if I'm double spacing it or single space. Single space is about 30 pages longer, and double space is about 60 pages longer. So the Last Hope for Zanus for single space, it'd be about a 600 page novel. 600 to 630 page novel around there. If it was single space, it would be about a 500. If it was single space, if Last Hope for Zanus was single space, it'd be about a 600 page novel, 580 to like 600, 500, I don't know, 560 to like 600 page novel for single space. If it's double space, you're looking at a 1200 page novel. So Last Hope for Zanus is a 192,000 word novel. I hope you guys can see this one now. You can see it well now. The Last Hope for Zanus is a 192,000 word novel and slightly longer than Fellowship of the Ring. So it's a pretty long novel because what? I'll get the book here. Give me a second. So my Last Hope for Zanus series is a slightly longer than this whole book. Fellowship of the Ring is a 530 page novel, I believe. Yeah, 530 pages. Looking at it right now. Yeah, 531 pages. My whole series is slightly longer than this book. It's about 30 to 60 pages longer than Fellowship of the Ring. So it's a long series, but it's not as long as Lord of the Rings series. Lord of the Rings series is about 450 plus thousand words, whereas my series is 192,000 words. So if it was single space, it'd be the size of this book. Single space would be about the size of this book, my Lord of the Rings book, Fellowship of the Ring book. Whereas if it's double space, you're looking at twice the size of this. You're looking at like a 1,200 page book. I'm gonna have my book double spaced, that way it's longer. So you're looking at a 1,200 page book for my 3-book series. Right? So you guys can see it better now, which is good because I moved the board. Right? So I'm gonna read what I said before. So volume 1, you have volume 1, you have volume 2, and you have volume 3. Okay? I'm using the black marker because you can see it better in black. So, right. So volume 1, again, you have the prologue, right? You have chapter 1, which is what? Young Tachyus. You got chapter 2. You guys see that? Hope you guys can see it well. Okay. You got chapter 2, which is what? 22 years later, which is my favorite chapter in volume 1, by the way. You got chapter 3, which is what? What was Cyrus? Is Cyrus no more? And it ends off with chapter 4, which is in search for the prince. Right? And that sums up volume 1. Okay. Now, volume 1 is the worst of the series, in my opinion. There's some people who might like volume 1 though. So I've read all 3 volumes many times, and volume 1 is the worst of the series. So this sums up volume 1. Volume 2, which you can argue is the best of the series. You can argue this is the best of the series, obviously. But I personally like volume 3 better. This is the best of the series. Right. If you're more into politics, you'll like volume 2 better. If you're more into adventure, action. If you're more into politics and drama, you'll like volume what? You'll like volume 2 the best. If you're more into action, adventure, plot twists, right? Big climaxes, then you'll like volume 3. But I personally like volume 3 the best. Like volume 3. But volume 3, what? You can also argue what? This is the best of the series, obviously. So both volume 1 and volume 3, both volume 2 and volume 3, you can argue are the best of the series. But I personally like, most people will probably end up liking volume 3 the best, most likely. Because volume 3, you have the adventure, the action, sequences, the plot twists, big climaxes. Whereas volume 2 is more about politics and drama, but it's an amazing volume, obviously. This is the best of the series, obviously. You like it better when I write in black, because you can see it better, obviously. I move the board so you can see it well now. You can argue this is the best of the series, obviously. Right? You can argue that volume 2, whereas volume 1 is the worst of the series. It's the worst of the series. There's some people who might like volume 1. There's some people who might like volume 1 the best, but I highly doubt it. It's either going to be volume 2 or volume 3. Again, if you're into politics and drama, you'll like volume 2 the best. If you're more into adventure, action, plot twists, and big climaxes, you'll like volume 3. Because volume 3 is where you get all the big climaxes, the plot twists, and the action, the adventure. Volume 3 is an adventure, whereas volume 2 is more about politics and drama, but it's a very interesting volume, obviously. So people are either going to like volume 2 the best, or they're going to like volume 3 the best. My favorite is personally volume 3. But I like volume 2 a lot. Volume 2 is very, very close. And volume 1 is the worst of the series. Right, so volume 1 was chapter 5. Chapter 5, which is what? Lithia. That's when Tacky's Music. Look at the interesting chapter of that. Right? Chapter 6 is what? Is captured. Right? Chapter 7, right? 7 is Tachyus or Colonius. Ivan, what do you mean by Tachyus or Colonius? You'll find out what I mean by that when you read the book. I won't spoil the story for you. Right? Chapter 8, you're happy because you can see it better now, right? I move the boards, you can see it better now. Chapter 8 is what? Landing Chaos. And chapter 9 is, I made a mistake. I said it's called Zayn's Last Hope. I changed the name. It's called The Exodus of Saphius. Ivan, what do you mean The Exodus of Saphius? Again, you'll find out what I mean by that when you read the book. It's not called Zayn's Last Hope. I changed the name. It's called The Exodus of Saphius. Right? Just for the record, in my book, I spell Saphius with a U, but I also spell it with an A. So if you see a different spelling, it's because some sections I spell Saphius with an A, and other sections I spell Saphius with a U. I just thought I should throw that out there. So just in case you might think, my book will have very minor typos. You might have maybe a few misspellings of a word here, and I went over my book many times. But you might find a few misspellings of a word or maybe an extra space. But my 99.7% of my typos are good. My book's in good pristine form because I put on Grammarly and I was able to spot where the typos were, obviously. So volume 2 is chapter 5, Lithium, when taxi means That's an interesting chapter. That's when you meet all the Southerns. Then chapter 6 is Captured. Chapter 7 is Tackies or Colonials. What do you mean by that? When you find out that when you read the book, you do. Hence why volume 2 you can argue is one of the best of the series. There's a lot of politics and drama. Chapter 8 is Land and Chaos. Again, that's a lot of politics. And chapter 9 is the Exodus of Saphius. So you know the story of Moses in the Bible? Well, think something like that for the Exodus of Saphius. You look at something crazy. And that's why Zayn should look at imagine a plan to the big screen. The Exodus of Saphius and all the Saphians, they cross the Gilead's cursed mountains. You look at something. Imagine 5,000 people crossing the Gilead's mountains. I don't want to spoil the story for you. And you get all the mosquitoes biting them, the jaguars. Look at something crazy. That's the beginning of volume 3, obviously, when they cross the mountains, obviously, the cursed Gilead's mountains. And hence why volume 3 is my favorite, because volume 3 is all adventure, action, plot twists, big climaxes, and hence why volume 3 is my favorite. Whereas volume 2 is amazing too also, but it's more politics and drama, obviously. Whereas volume 3 is pretty much volume 3 is pretty much the life in Zanus, obviously. The life in Zanus. So volume 3 takes place pretty much behind the walls of Zanus. The life. So if you're more into what happens, what Tackius and Tactonius' life in Zanus, you'll like volume 1. But volume 1 is the least interesting of them all. Because it's the worst one in the series. Guaranteed everyone will say volume 1's the worst. Whereas volume 2 they're either gonna like volume 2 or volume 3 the best. I personally like volume 3 the best because you get the adventure, the action, the plot twists, and big climaxes. Obviously. Right? So the Exodus of Saphius, this is my favorite chapter. The Exodus of Saphius, you can argue, is the best chapter in volume 2, but most people will either like the Lithia chapter or the Tackies or Colonials chapter the best, most likely. Or the Capture chapter. If you're into action, you'll like the Capture chapter. But the Tackies or Colonials chapter or the Lithia chapter, that might be the chapter that everyone likes the best. But my personal favorite is the Exodus of Saphius or the what? The Lithia chapter, Tackies or Colonials chapter, and the Exodus of Saphius, those are the 3 really good chapters in the book. As well as Captured. Whereas the Land and Chaos is the worst one in the volume 2 series. Volume 3 is what? It starts off with chapter 10, right? Which is what? Unexpected Journey, obviously, right? Journey. Right? That's when what? That's when what? The Saphians cross what? The ancient Gilead's cursed mountains. That's when this chapter with Ephesus, obviously. That's when you get the big climaxes and action scenes of the story, obviously. I don't want to kill the story for you. Chapter Unexpected Journey, you can argue, is my favorite chapter in volume 3. But volume 3 is an amazing volume, man. After that, you have what? The Secret Council, chapter 11, right? The Secret Council and Surprising Arrival. That's another good chapter, right? You got chapter 12, which you can argue is the best of the series. Chapter 12, you can argue, is the best chapter in the whole series. Chapter 12 is Walking with the Ancestors. Ivan, what do you mean Walking with the Ancestors? You'll find out what I mean by that when you read the book. I don't want to kill the story for you. Right? And it ends off with chapter 13, which is the war, obviously. Chapter 13 is what? War and Becoming King. Ivan, what do you mean by War and Becoming King? You'll find out what I mean by that when you read the book. And that's why Volume 3 is my favorite of the series. But you can argue Volume 2 is better if you. They're both really, really good. It's hard for me to pick between Volume 3 and Volume 2 because they're both really, really good, man. Even though Volume 3, you have the adventure, the action sequences, the plot, and the big climax, Volume 2 is really, really good. The chapters The chapters kind of kept me more hooked in Volume 2 than Volume 3 in a way. Hence why you can argue Volume 2 is better than Volume 3. But at the same time, Volume 3, you have the amazing plot twists and big climaxes and the adventure and the action sequences. Like all of Sapphi's exiting what? You know what I'm saying? Going on the Exodus, it's an adventure. Hence why you can argue Volume 3 is better. Hence why it's going to be hard to choose between Volume 3 and Volume 2. But I personally like Volume 2 the best. So let me read what I just said here. I hope you guys can see this well. So Volume 1 is a prologue. You have Chapter 1, which is Young Tactius. Chapter 2, 20 years later, which is my favorite chapter in Volume 1. Then you have Chapter 3, which is What Was Cyrus and Cyrus No More. You have Chapter 4, In Search for the Prince, and that sums up Volume 1. And it's pretty much the life in Zanus for the Northerns, obviously, right? That's pretty much sums it up. Volume 1 is just the Northerns. It's about the Northerns' lives in Zanus, pretty much, behind the walls. That's why it's the worst of the series, in my opinion. And then Volume 2 is when you meet all the Southerners, you have a lot of politics and drama with Lithia, Belle, Mary, Cornelius, Eli. You'll find out how powerful Eli is politically in the Tactics and Cornelius chapter. And that's what Tactics is. Hence why a lot of people will like Volume 2 the best. And in Volume 2 is Chapter 5, Lithia. That's when Tactics meets Lithia. You have Chapter 6, Captured. You have Chapter 7, Tactics and Colonius. You have Chapter 8, Land and Chaos. And you have Chapter 9, The Exodus of Sapphius. So the story of Moses. Remember Prince of Egypt, the movie? If you guys have seen the movie, remember when Moses and all those Egyptian and all the Hebrew slaves exited Egypt? Well, think of something like that for Zanus. When Tactius and all the Saphians exit they exit Sapphius. I don't want to kill the story for you. And then they journey through the cursed Gilead Mountains, and then you have Ephesus and all that stuff. Hence why you look at the best story ever told, man. Whereas Volume 3, which is my favorite, it starts off with Chapter 10, Unexpected Journey, and then Chapter 11, The Secret Council, Surprising Arrival. What do you mean by Secret Council, Surprising Arrival? Again, you'll find out when you read the book. Chapter 12, you can argue is the best chapter, Walking with the Ancestors, and then Chapter 13 is War and Becoming King. Obviously. So my favorite chapter, Ivan, what's your favorite chapter? My favorite chapter in Volume 1 is 22 Years Later for Volume 1. For Volume 2, I don't have a favorite chapter because they're all really, really good. But my top three ones are the Lithia chapter, Tactics and Colonius, and the Exodus of Sapphius. Whereas the Captured chapter and Land and Chaos, those chapters are pretty good. But my favorite is probably the Exodus of Sapphius. That's probably my favorite one of Volume 2, or the Lithia chapter. But the Tactics and Colonius chapter is really good too. I don't have a favorite chapter for Volume 2 because Volume 2 is so fucking good. Volume 3, my favorite chapter is probably either Unexpected Journey or Walking with the Ancestors. War and Becoming King is really, really good, but it's the whole chapter of that is just Tactius fighting. You know what I'm saying? Walking with the Ancestors, you can argue, is my favorite one in Chapter 12. But I also like War and Becoming King because you have the battle scenes. I also like Unexpected Journey too. So I don't have a favorite chapter for Volume 3 and Volume 2 because they're so good. But for Volume 1, 22 Years Later is my favorite chapter. So that sums up. This is a layout of my Last Hope for Zanus story. Right? And hence why you're looking at it. Hence why if you adapt this is basically, imagine something like Prince of Egypt when Moses and the Hebrew slaves exited Egypt. Imagine something like that for Chapter 9, the Exodus of Sapphius. Why are the Saphians exiting Sapphius? Well, I don't want to kill the story for you. The only thing I'm going to say is you have the land markings, obviously. Obviously, right? I don't want to spoil the story for you, man. You have the land markings. That's it. That's all I'm going to say. I don't want to spoil the story for you. So you're probably wondering, why the heck are they exiting Sapphius? I don't want to kill the story for you. You'll find out when you read the book. Right? That's why you're looking at the best story we told. Yes, even better than Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Obviously. Right? Now, the characters I forgot to mention. So very briefly, I'm going to say who are the major characters, okay? So who are the major characters in the story? Major characters. Right? Who are the supporting characters? I'll do the human characters first, okay? Who are the supporting characters, obviously? And who are the minor characters? That way you guys now do who are the minor characters, right? Who are the minor characters? So the major characters, so Tactius is the second, obviously. He is the main character, okay? So I'm going to be the lead of the movie, obviously. He's the main character of the story, right? The major characters, the other two major characters, Papyri. You have Papyri. You have Tacitonius, right? And you have Cassius. These guys are what? They're the major characters of the story, honestly. Whereas everyone else are supporting. So Tactius II is the main character. Papyri, Tacitonius, and Cassius, they're not the main characters, but they're what? They're major characters, obviously. So the main character is Tactius II, whereas Papyri, Tacitonius, and Cassius, they're the major characters. You'll find out that when you read the story. They're the major characters of the story. Who are the supporting characters? You have Lithia, all right? Lithia's the major character, but she's more supporting. You have Lithia, right? You have Belle. You have Mary. You have Cornelius, right? You have Job. You have Sirius. You have Maramis. You have Sarah, right? You have Lithius is a bit more minor, but she's a supporting character. You have Baramis. Right? Am I missing anyone? Lithia, Belle, Mary, Cornelius, Job, Eli, right? Eli. These guys are all what? Supporting characters. Whereas Lithius and Baramis are more what? They're a bit more minor, right? A bit more minor, but they're supporting, obviously. They're a bit more minor, but they're supporting characters. They're still supporting characters, but they're a bit more minor. Whereas everyone else, like Eli, Maramis, Sarah, Sirius, Job, Cornelius, Mary, Belle, Lithia, they're all supporting characters. Because you know what I'm saying? Like Maramis, you see him in the prologue, you see him in volume 1, hence why he's a bit more major. Whereas Lithius and Maramis, they're supporting characters, but they're a bit more major. Hence why those guys I'm going to pay like $600,000. Because they're supporting, but they're not as major as the other guys. But they're still supporting characters. Right? Whereas Eli, Sarah, Maramis, Sirius, Job, Cornelius, Mary, Belle, Lithia, they're all what? They're all supporting characters. Whereas Tactius II is the main character, and Papyri, Tacitonius, and Cassius, they're major characters. Now, who are the minor characters? Elizabeth. She's minor, obviously, right? Elizabeth. You have Mel. You have Lau. You have Tactius I. Tactius I is a major part of the plot, but he's only in the prologue in the end of volume 3. So he's a minor character, obviously. You only see him in the prologue, obviously. So you have Elizabeth, Mel, Lau, Tactius I. Obviously, these are the human characters, and this is just the human characters. I'll talk about the animal characters later, who are the main characters, obviously. These are the human characters. You guys are probably happy because you can see the board well. I moved the board so you can see it well now, which is good, obviously. You can see the board well, right? So who are the minor characters? So the minor characters are Elizabeth, Mel, Lau, Tactius I, obviously. Who else am I missing? You have Francis. You have Sebastian. Right? You have Cleo. You have Cleo. Who else? You have Cleo. There's other characters I can mention, but I don't want to ruin the story for you. I'll talk about the other characters that I missed that I did not mention in my last video, obviously. So these are pretty much, this sums up the minor characters. You have Elizabeth, Mel, Lau, Tactius I, Francis, Sebastian, and Cleo. These are all what? These are all the human characters. This sums up the major characters, supporting characters, and the minor characters. So the major characters, the main character is Tactius II, obviously, which is me. And then Papyri and Tacitonius and Cassius, they're major characters as they have a lot of scenes in the book, obviously. These guys have a lot of scenes in the book too, but the Salamons you don't see until volume 2. Whereas Papyri, you see him in volume 1. You see Sirius in volume 1, but Sirius isn't as major as Papyri, obviously. And you see Tacitonius and Cassius in volume, you see they're in all the 3 volumes. Whereas these guys, you see them all in volume 2. And they're major characters, but they're more supporting, obviously. They're not as major. Whereas Papyri, Tacitonius, and Cassius are major characters, and Tactius II is the main character. And the minor characters are Elizabeth, Mel, Lau, Tactius I, Francis, Sebastian, and Cleo, pretty much for the human characters. But Tactius I, he's in the prologue, So he's going to be in a good 40 minutes at the beginning of the movie, obviously. So he's in a good chunk of scenes in prologue. He's in the prologue, obviously. But after the prologue, you don't see him until the end of Volume 3. Hence why he's more of a minor character, obviously. But he's more major than Francis, Sebastian, Cleo, Mel, Lowndes, and Elizabeth. So Tacky's the first. He's in the prologue, obviously. So he's in the entire prologue, and you see him in the end of Volume 3. He's going to be in a good 40 minutes at the beginning of the movie, and you won't see him until the end of Volume 3. So he's a minor character. So these guys are all minor characters. That would be cool to bring that up. Now I'll talk. Oh shit! My board fell down. Give me a sec. I'm gonna shut this camera off here.